Madam Recorder, are we ready? Tamar, are we ready? Yes? We have a DA and we have a recording? Good, all right. And I'm gonna Board of Supervisors back to order. We are on agenda item number 16A, which is for possible action and discussion regarding a $100,000 increase in purchase authority for some chemicals, making it now $300,000. Who's here to take us through this item? Carol Akers or Andy? Which one? Andy?
Yeah, I'm here, as is Carol. For the record, Andy, wastewater utility manager for Carson City. So we're actually asking for three things with this item. First one is, as you already mentioned, the $100,000 increase in the amount of purchase authority. Second on the list is extending the contract through June of this year. And then third is utilization of a joinder contract with the city of Tucson to purchase these chemicals. A little bit of history. We originally brought our annual bleach purchase contract in June of 2020. At that time, we were utilizing the joinder contract through the city of Las Vegas, which was through that, which to purchase the bleach from Thatcher Corporation. That contract expired at the end of January of 21. So just in another week or so here. Knowing that contract was going to be ending at the end of January, they had not solicited the bids for the new contract. City of Tucson was actually taking the lead on the new contract. So we didn't know if Thatcher would continue to be our vendor or if it'd be a new vendor. So we left some of the purchase authority that we need to get through the year out. We left it out on the wastewater side for the bleach that we purchased for the water resource recovery facility, our sewage treatment plant. And we did that largely because the sewage treatment plant is our largest user by far of bleach. We take a delivery every other week, if not every week, depending on the time of the year. So if we were going to be switching vendors mid-year, we wanted to have sufficient funds available to switch to a new vendor. Fortunately, through the new City of Tucson contract, we are still with Thatcher Corporation. I spoke with them earlier this week. It's business as usual. Don't see any new changes coming. So that's what I have on it. If Carol has anything she wants to add.
Ms. Akers, do you have any additional comments, or are you ready for us to ask questions?
Yep, I'm ready for questions.
Okay. Does any member of the board have a question? I don't see any. If somebody would like to raise their hand to make a motion. Somebody want to make the motion on this one? Supervisor White, make the motion.
I move to approve the purchase authority as requested.
I have a motion and a second to approve the purchase authority as requested. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Need one more vote, please. Thank you very much. The motion was passed unanimously. We're going to move on now to agenda item 16B, which is discussion and possible action regarding a determination that USA Scales, Quality Scales Unlimited, is the lowest bidder on a landfill contract. We have Mr. Stuckey with us. Would you like to take us through this, please?
Yes, I will, Mayor Bagwell. Thank you. Dan Stuckey, Deputy Public Works Director for the record. So as you mentioned, Mayor Bagwell, this is up for a contract with Quality Scales Unlimited for design, fabrication, delivery, and installation of 3 truck scales at the landfill. The current scales that we have at the landfill are 25 plus years old. We've repaired and welded and done all sorts of things to them, and frankly, they're just past their useful life. So this is a critical project. Obviously, without those scales operating, our landfill can't operate effectively. So this project's going to replace those scales. This is part, I know Supervisor Giomi and Mayor Bagwell, you're aware that there is a bigger project that will be happening. It's realigning the entrance road in a new scale house facility out there. That's scheduled to be constructed this summer and fall. This is essentially the initial phase of that project. Ultimately, these scales will be installed with that project, but we wanted to set up this contract separately for a couple of reasons. One is we didn't want it under the control of a general contractor where we'd pay additional markup on the equipment. So we're saving roughly 10 to 15% here on that, as well as because we know that our scales are past their useful life, in the interim condition until that ultimate facility is built, they could serve as backups for the scales that we have out there on site. There was 2 bids received. There's not a lot of bids for these types of projects because this is very specialty equipment, but the 2 big Nevada players did bid on it. We feel good about the price and awarding the contract. I do have Rick Cooley on the line who runs the landfill from Public Works, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Does any of the supervisors have a question? Okay, seeing none. Supervisor Giomi, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I move to award contract number 203-00208 as presented.
And I
have a motion by Supervisor Giomi and a second by Supervisor Jones to approve the contract. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, please say no. The motion is carried unanimously with 5 yeses. Thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item number 17A, and she is ready. She's on it. For possible discussion and action regarding a grant in the amount of $112,013.37. We can't forget the pennies. With NDOW. Ms. Budge, would you like to take us through this, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Supervisors. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I had a lot of questions on this item, so I thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of a brief background on the rifle range, where we're at today, and how this grant kind of folds into what we've been doing so far, if you don't mind just for a moment.
Thank you.
So in 2018, the city retained 2 independent evaluation reports on the range, and they were really helpful. They identified physical and operational improvements that they suggested to make the range safer, and also with the goal of meeting National Rifle Association standards. The Range Task Force, which was a citizens group appointed by the Board of Supervisors, was really helpful, and they reviewed those evaluation reports, and then they prioritized projects as we move forward and are able to obtain funding to make further improvements. One of the operational recommendations that was made was having certified range safety officers on site to assist members of the public about their shooting behavior. We get a lot of first-time users. They just went to Sportsman Warehouse, they bought a gun, they have bullets, but they don't know what to do. They don't know where to put their target. They don't know to impact the backstop. They don't really have any experience. So we get a lot of those first-time users, which is great. We want to have anybody from the general public use the facility, but we want them to do it in a safe and thoughtful manner. The city, in response to that, approved a full-time range coordinator and also 3 seasonal range safety officers toward this effort. Our new range coordinator is Paul Joseph, and he just started, and 2 weeks ago, he's a former police officer from Arizona, used to live in Nevada. He's so happy to be back, and he's already a great part of the parks team. So we already have some amazing and qualified staff working out at the range. In addition, we have 16 active right now, seasonal or range safety officer volunteers, in the past 6 months have volunteered over 1,200 hours at a value of over $33,000 to the city. So I just want to take the time to thank the volunteers. It's really a thankless job. They're not only acting as range safety officers, but they're doing maintenance and helping keep the facility clean and wonderful for people to use. And they're working with the public on how to shoot safely and giving that added instruction. And we've been able to certify all of those volunteers through the NRA certification as well. The city, with support of the Nevada Department of Wildlife, or NDOW, invested more than $800,000 in safety improvements in the range. It's really significant. From backstops to berms, signage, and drainage, all of the facility now meets NRA standards, which is tremendous. We've also implemented environmental best practices, which was a recommendation, and have regular cleanups of all the brass, and which really wasn't happening before. We were able to, before the construction, also reclaim all of the lead and the brass that were in the backstops and the lateral berms before doing construction. So we've really trying to take that environmental best practice and stewardship to heart as well. The range is currently on its winter schedule, especially with daylight saving time. It just gets dark early, so we can't have the extended hours. But right now we're open Thursdays through Sundays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And then starting March 1st, public use will expand to 6 days per week, Tuesdays through Sundays, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. until daylight savings time again in the fall, which is great. And we've had requests during COVID, before I go further, the range has been a really great respite for people because with golf courses and trails being very, very popular right now, it's one of the few activities that people can actually do. July 1st, 2020, a new fee structure was implemented and approved by the Board of Supervisors with a goal of 50% cost recovery at least, with all proceeds going back into the range. It's one of the few facilities that the board has directed that all the proceeds go back into operating and maintaining the facility. The year-to-date revenue is just over $49,000, and the range has already achieved a 52% cost recovery, and we still have 5 months left in the fiscal year. So we're well ahead of the goals that we anticipated on being. So far, 328 passes have been sold, which comprise 412 members. Some are family passes, so one pass might be up to 3 kids and 2 adults, so that's what the difference of those numbers are. Of these passes, 29 were free to disabled veterans, and the veteran passes can also be used at the MAC or the pool. So we made a universal pass for veterans that can be able to use all 3 facilities free of charge. Seniors are the largest group to date purchasing passes, with over 180 passes sold and only 4 to out-of-state residents. I know there was a great concern about out-of-state residents using the facility, but only 4 passes have been sold. I can't tell you how many of the drop-ins have because they all pay cash and it's a little bit hard to track, but it's not as significant, I think, as the concern may have been. The public is the primary user of the facility, and the Board of Supervisors approved a policy to ensure that all 3 of the ranges, the short range, long range, and the shooting bays, are always at least 50% available to the public. We've made 389 reservations so far, and of those, 49.4% are government and law enforcement. Those are free of charge. 23.1% of the reservations are nonprofit groups, shooting clubs, and 27.5% of those reservations are commercial users. So despite the number of reservations, it sounds like a lot. Those are 4-hour increments, but it's still only 16% of the usage. So it really shows you that the public is the significant majority user of the range. Now on to the grant and why we're here. Actually, you probably want me to get onto that. The item before you today is consideration of a $124,459 grant for improvements to the range as identified in the evaluation reports and as a priority of the Range Task Force. This is a federal grant. It passed through the Nevada Department of Wildlife locally at the state, as NDOW is the local fiscal agent. The grant funds come from firearm and ammunition sales as authorized by the Pittman-Robertson Act, and that's a federal act. The grant requires a 10% local match, which is significantly lower than it used to be. It used to be a 25% match required, which is what we've paid on previous Department of Wildlife grants, but federal legislation changed lowering that requirement, which is definitely in our benefit. So the match is available through a Quality of Life undesignated account. It would be a match if upon your approval for $12,445.93. And in the Quality of Life Fund, there's designated locations that are eligible for that funding. Not every park, not every open space is eligible, but the rifle range is expressly listed toward the very beginning of the Quality of Life initiative. The scope of the grant includes professional engineering of an eyebrow and a baffle system for the long range only. That was identified as our biggest safety risk in both evaluation reports. So we recognize that and want to continue to try to make improvements to the rifle range, the long range specifically, to make sure we don't have ricochets leaving the facility. Purchase and installation of a pay kiosk with an arm. This includes utility design and installation, repairs to the covers over the short and long range, purchase of target frames, tables, shooting benches, and trash receptacles, purchase and installation of a security system. I also received some other questions from some of you. I wanted to just make sure I highlight and answer your questions. There were questions about, do Davis-Bacon wages apply to this project? The answer is yes, but only on the construction elements, which is very minimal in the project. So it would include the actual construction work on the utilities, not the design component, and then the work on the covers over the long and short range. Those are the only two construction components that would apply to Davis-Bacon wages. Because it is a federal pass-through grant, we have to utilize the federal regulations. Everything else are goods and services that would be purchased and just need to be purchased according to NRS 333 and then our local city purchasing requirements. I was also asked, how much does a baffle system cost? Well, right now, we don't know for our range because we haven't had it designed yet. The engineer would give us a cost estimate. But I did contact the Parks and Recreation Director at Douglas County. They just recently installed a baffle system. And for materials and installation, they spent $50,000. So to give you an idea, I would anticipate a future NDOW grant for the construction is how I would assume to fund that upon your approval. And then I was asked about the electrical service. Will the electrical service only serve the kiosk, or are we going to look bigger? We do have a master plan for the site, and it anticipates having a classroom and other functions, and we recognize we have security and safety issues there after hours. We've already been approved for, in the grant, it includes a security cameras, so we would install those. The utilities would provide service to that. We also need the ability to make announcements, to call the range cold. If there's a safety issue, if there's a medical issue, we need to be able to make announcements, and then also, not from a safety perspective, but we want to have tournaments. We've met with the Culture and Tourism Authority. There's a desire to bring out shooting competitions and some environmental impact, so the utilities would help meet that need as well. So hopefully that answers all your questions. I know it's kind of a lot to wrap your head around, but I'm open to any other questions you might have.
Thank you. Just a general question. I'd received a public comment on this item, and I think you were slightly touching on it, but to dive more directly to the question, they're indicating, I actually experienced this at my own home, so I'm positive it's even worse at the range. There's no cell phone service or a way to call an emergency service. So do you anticipate ever having like even an emergency contact button or anything of that nature that would call EMS? Like you said, for man down, medical issue, just what do you anticipate we can do to meet that need?
That was identified in one of the reports as something we should strive for, and I'm hoping the utilities might help us get to that point. Right now, our staff carry radios on site, so the range safety officers, our range coordinator, the park rangers that often work as range safety officers at time to time on site do have radios. There's radios in their trucks, and then they have the handhelds as well. So we do have the ability to call for help or get some assistance from that manner. We would love to have that, and we're going to look into options. The cell phone service, I wouldn't say it's completely doesn't work because I have made calls out there, but you have to find the right spot, and it is difficult. So it's something we are going to be
Maybe
looking
just a
forward towards.
booster or something that would give you a 2,000-foot radius or something to boost the signal?
Yeah.
That's great.
But that's a
thank
great
you.
question.
Does any other members of the board have a question? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Giomi, did you want to try a motion?
Sure, I think it'll be relatively easy to try. I move to authorize acceptance of the grant as presented and to authorize the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Director to sign grant documents related to the project.
I have a motion and a motion by Supervisor Giomi and a second by Supervisor White. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you again, Ms. Budge. We're doing a great progress at the range, and I received nothing but tons of compliments. And I know it took us a long time to get it open, but I think it's really, we did it right, and we're continuing to follow through on our commitment for the final few projects we need to do. So please thank your staff again for a job well done. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 18A under finance. This is discussion and possible action regarding a resolution to augment and amend the Carson City fiscal year 2021 budget. Ms. Russell, will you take us through, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to recognize that this room looks amazing.
It does.
You're much more intimidating now.
Oh, good. Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, there you
the
go.
whole goal. Okay. So this item is to adopt a resolution to augment and amend the Carson City 2021 budget, so the current budget that we're in the amount of $93,839,618. This is the biggest augmentation I have ever seen. It consists of carryovers of restricted and unassigned fund balances, unfinished projects from fiscal year 20, appropriation of grants in the current year, as well as prior year grants that weren't complete. So new awards we weren't aware of, as well as the prior year grants, we're moving them forward from 6/30/20. Any items approved by IFC or this board during the last 6 months. And then we also move forward any unused dollars. So we look at beginning fund balance, what we budgeted for 21, and we compare that to the audited fiscal year 20. And we make the fiscal year 21 beginning budget match that audited balance. This augmentation is so humongous because it also includes the 21 capital and supplemental requests that were approved in the September meeting, September 17th meeting. Typically, those would already be included in the budget, but because of COVID, we held off because we weren't sure what was going to happen and brought them back later once we knew what the dollar amount was at 6/30/2020. So I'll just give a brief overview of some of the larger, excuse me, some of the larger funds. And if you have any questions as I'm going through, please stop me. The general fund, I always start out because it's the most important thing everybody wants to know. If we do everything that I'm recommending here, the ending contingency balance would be $1,930,000, which is huge for a contingency balance. The ending audited balance was about $18 million, and the estimated beginning balance was about $7.5 million. So that gave us $10.3 million that we have to add into the current year budget to make that beginning and ending match. Of that 10 million, 1.1 million is restricted. That means there's some external reason that we're restricting it. It's restricted because NRS says we have to spend it on something. A donor has told us we have to spend it on something. There's some external force that's telling us we have to restrict those funds. So that's kind of out of all of our hands. It just needs to be moved forward and used for that same purpose. There was additional funding for the landfill of $200,000. They just made more revenue than we anticipated. So we're going to add that to the landfill in the capital projects fund for their equipment. The capital improvement that was improved in September was about $5 million. And then there was about $800,000 in supplemental requests that we approved as well. And then also as part of that September 17th meeting, we talked about $400,000 moving to RTC because of the losses that they sustained in fiscal year 2020 in the gas taxes. There's also the very last page that I put in the this item is a recommendation by Mayor Bagwell to move another $300,000 to RTC for the school zones. We've been having, I guess, some complaints about some of the school zones, and so this will help. Yeah, well, I was trying to be nice. This will help fund and fix those areas, those concerns. I can go through some of the restrictions if you'd like to hear. Other than that, there's not a lot to go over in the general fund. Yes.
Mr. Jones? Sorry.
Was the school zone, was that for the signal lights? Was that?
So So I don't mind going over that a little bit because it's something that maybe people haven't heard before, and it crosses over with our RTC committee. So
And I
just
think
to,
Darren or somebody's available.
what we had done is approved a safe routes to school
Right,
plan
right.
with all the school
Yeah.
zones and all of that, and had put up signs in lieu of the flashers, because we
Right.
didn't have the money yet and couldn't really come up with that much money to do all those 15-mile-an-hour flashers. So we were using school signs that changed and said Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. We, I don't know, I think Stacy and I might agree it's probably the most emails I've received on a subject matter.
Right, right.
And we had committed at the RTC in the Safe Routes Plan that as funding was available, we would convert signs to flashers. So this particular one will allow 300,000 for us to take those, the most important school zones that we have quite a mixture of signs, and then we can switch them to flashers.
So is that King Street and?
Oh, probably. The RTC will look at all of them, but probably we're looking at Winnie, Mountain, King
Yeah,
Street,
yeah.
and Ormsby. So it's
Right.
that's our big problem. We have 3 schools in that short zone area. So I can't commit that that's exactly where it's going to go because the RTC will make those final decisions, but that's certainly the high priority.
And I am making the recommendation that the 300,000 come out of contingency. The remaining balance that kind of falls out after all of the expenses that I just talked about was 2.6 million, and we had previously discussed moving that to extraordinary maintenance. So I wanted to keep that consistent with what we've recommended. However, that 300,000 could be changed and come out of the 2.6 if that's the board's pleasure.
Contingency's fine, because I think we want it, unless the board feels differently, but I think we have strongly indicated we're funding our asset management program, so
And that 1.9.
I think we just got lucky and have a little bit of money, we can accomplish this.
Yeah, and the 1.9 million in contingency is looking humongous right now with the way that our sales taxes are coming in. It's looking great, but that could change at any moment.
Yeah.
I still think 1.9 million is a really big, good fund balance or contingency. So
And Ms. Russell, will you, for the board too, would you tell us what percentage does that leave us in the ending fund balance that's recommended, so that we have some financial goals?
So it's what we ended with, 8.4% is what we budgeted at the beginning of the year. So we're just moving to that.
And so that hits the financial policy
Yes.
that the city has in place. Okay, thank you.
All right, so if that's it for the general fund, we'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, sorry, Stacy, didn't see anything.
Sorry, first
He doesn't know how
meeting.
to raise his hand or get his
First
microphone to
meeting.
work.
We'll
Yeah,
figure it
there
out.
you go. We're good.
So, the what was the number of contingency? I'm sorry.
1.9,
1.9?
1,930,000.
Okay, so that 1.9, is the 300,000 already out of that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was the clarification I wanted. Thanks.
Yes.
Oh. We're doing actually pretty darn good for the brand-new system in here.
For first day, yeah,
I'm
you guys are
really
doing great.
Thankful to all of you.
I've been
We're-
watching it. Apparently, I'm still watching it.
Oh, she'll
on
have the
WebEx.
computer up.
I
There you
never
go.
logged out. So I'll go through a couple of the other smaller funds, but just as important. The airport fund, this is kind of an in and out. It's a pass-through. They get FAA grants through us, so we get the money for them and then wire it out to them. But the budget has to be there, or the fund will have a budget violation. So we're moving about $1.5 million, adding it to both revenue and expense. The capital projects fund is another big one. Computer's not working as I expect it to. So the capital projects fund, there was $7,300,000 that we're carrying forward from the prior year. And we do a lot of our capital in the summertime. So our ending year end is 6/30. So a lot of this stuff is probably already spent. but this is our first augmentation, bringing that budget dollars forward into 21. So, so we just have to bring that forward again, so we don't have a budget violation, because it's there, but we spent it this year. And then the 200,000 I already mentioned for landfill, the 5 million from the general fund. And then there was a $5,000 Pony Express air pack donation that was added too. For IFC, there were only 3 things that break fix covered. It was a heat pump replacement for Fire Station 52 for $8,000, $15,000 for the City Hall video surveillance system, ended up being a little bigger than expected. And then those Juniper data center switches that went down in August and took everything out, that was $52,000 out of there. So our ending changes in the break fix fund after we pull everything forward is actually $770,000, which again is big. Usually it's $350,000 for the year. So my plan is if we don't have anything else break, I'll leave $350 there for next year, and then we can use that $400 for capital for 22.
Yes.
So always looking ahead.
Ms. Russell?
Yes.
Could you remind the listening audience and the new members, we have a park asphalt for $283,500. Can you remind the public? Because again, we had put a lot of things on abeyance, but then are moving it in specific to lines right now. Can you remind them where that asphalt work will be
I
done?
think it was the Edmund Sports Complex, if I'm remembering correctly. It was $600,000, and they did some of it last year and some of it this year. So I think it's spent.
Is that accurate, or were we going to do some work on Longview? I'm trying to get I'm putting my park and rec hat back on too, whereas
Yeah.
Longview on our next year's plan, so.
Well, sorry, Madam Mayor, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. We have a lot of asphalt projects underway. The Pete Livermore Sports Complex was over $600,000. It did come from multiple funds. That project is complete. We did have $250,000 for this fiscal year in the capital improvement project budget that you approved in September. We are getting an asphalt assessment of all of our trails and our parking lots, so we can figure out what is the worst and what is the best, and we can prioritize our work. So we're doing that for the pathways and for the parking lots. And I've also talked to the Public Works Director about looking at parking lots citywide to make sure we're doing what does the city need most, not just what does Parks need most or what does Public Works need, but what's the worst parking lot, so we can be a little bit more thoughtful citywide when we're all looking at those capital dollars.
So again, that fits into the asset management program where we're
Yes.
looking to help make good decisions on where do you put the limited dollars that we have and which one's the best one to
Right,
put
so
that
the
in.
assessment
Okay.
reports we had were for buildings. We didn't have anything for asphalts and the other infrastructure we have, like playgrounds. We have playground safety inspectors that can obviously assess those things and irrigation systems, but pavement's sort of that other thing outside of roads. We do have a lot of pavement besides roads that we have to take care of and maintain and make sure they're safe.
Okay, thank you. I see that, don't leave just in
Okay.
case. Supervisor Giomi has a question.
So yeah, that was my question. So are we endeavoring to get that into the asset management program? The pavement and the trails and okay, so.
Yes. I think every asset needs to be in the asset
Right,
management
no, I
program.
agree.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah. We sort of started big with the buildings,
Yeah.
and obviously we need to get the small stuff in there as well.
And can you use the same grading system? I suspect you can't because it's not the same kind of road build that Public Works uses to,
I would like that same theory, so
Uh-huh.
we are
the parking
seeking,
lots, I think you could, but
the
I
parking
don't know
lots
about
for
the
sure.
trails would be, probably don't have to be to the same standard.
We're gonna try to work with the same consultant that did the pavement condition index
The
for the
Yes.
roads, so we can have that same assessment for our trails and for the parking lots.
Okay,
But that's the approach we're gonna take, but the numbering system might not totally
right,
translate.
right. Okay.
Ms. Russell?
And that's my fault. I thought you were
No
asking
problem.
about the facility maintenance asphalt, which was the health department. So I was already prepared to answer that question.
I snuck one, I know, because it is,
I
it
did
does
not look at
say
the parks asphalt,
parks,
so.
asphalt facility, right, we got them both,
Right.
so thank you.
Thank you, Jen. for saving me. All right, so then, if everybody's okay, I'll move on to the transit fund. That is, we got $3.6 million from the CARES Act just for our transit system. That's paying 100%, which is amazing. We transfer about $440,000 from the general fund to cover the match every year. So at year end, during the second round of augmentations, I'm going to bring that back and see if we really need to transfer that money or we can leave it in the general fund. Of course, I'll have to get Public Works involved because they might have some other ideas, but that is an option. And then the roll forward for some equipment there that they have purchased at this point, but not at 6:30, was $434,000. There were some buses that didn't arrive until after year end. So the Regional Transportation Fund is the next fund that I was going to talk about. And if you have any questions as I'm going along about other funds, please stop me. This is a humongous roll forward, $11 million. That's federal or state grants, basically the South Carson Street project. That's $7 million in Tiger grants, and then they had some other grants for other projects. And then $6 million is just roll forward from unfinished projects. We got about $6 million from the state last year to do the South Carson Street project. So a big part of that roll forward is, again, South Carson Street project. The Quality of Life Fund is my next fund. And this one had $1.9 million in grants. And when I say roll forward of grants, I mean revenues and expenses. So it's going to hit both sides of the balance sheet or income statement. So that's $1.9 million. There was about another $5.6 or $560,000 in carryover of unfinished projects. And then for the undesignated, in total, it was $2.3 million. However, the approval of this item by the public is very specific about the departments in this. So Parks Maintenance has $222,000 in Parks Maintenance that is undesignated. $363,000 in Parks Capital that is undesignated, and then $1.7 million in open space that's undesignated. So we have plenty of open space if we need it. The Street Maintenance Fund, $624,000 was capital needs equipment, street lights that's rolling forward that they did not spend last year. Street repairs and striping, about $575,000, which is great. And then $145,000 in infrastructure repairs. The grants fund actually looks like a little line item on my spreadsheet here, but it actually covers almost every other grant in the city besides the public works grants. So all the fire, health, sheriff, all those grants are included in this grants fund. So carryover from prior year grants of unspent money was $1.2 million. And the new grant revenue and expense that we added was about $9 million. So this is because the budget is created in March and the federal fiscal year end is September 31st. So we typically don't know what those grants are until much later, than March when we're preparing the budget. So we do our best with what we have and then end up getting the actual award and adding this to the budget during the first round of augmentations. So it's pretty normal that the grant fund is a big augmentation. Oops. The 911 surcharge. This is obviously for the 911 system. They're going to increase the maintenance service contracts by $138,000, and that's because their plan is to add car cameras on the sheriff's vehicles. They have a Tiburon project, the fire department CAD alert system, $110,000, and they have a fiber optic project of $120,000. So their remaining undesignated is going to be about 523,000 at this point in time. The infrastructure tax fund, the carryover here of projects that were not completed, that were moving to the current year, is about 1.7 million. As you can see, the biggest one there is the South Carson Street project. Stormwater drainage is, again, projects carry forward about $2.6 million. Biggest one here is South Carson Street project. The total South Carson Street project was over $20 million, so there's quite a bit going on there. The wastewater fund, they have a lot of little projects, as you can see. The project's carry forward was $5.6 million. And they had some equipment roll forward of about $700,000. They are rolling forward $312,000 into their infrastructure capital account. And this account they've designated specifically for projects that they have on their docket. They know they want to do it, but they haven't nailed down the budget yet. So once they nail down the budget, they'll move it into the capital projects fund, the actual fund for construction of capital projects. But the infrastructure capital is money they're planning on spending. They're also putting some money in undesignated. So undesignated in fiscal year 21 already had a balance of 2.7 million, but they're adding to that 1.1 million, so the total undesignated will be 3.8 million. Now this undesignated is for, it's savings for future years. So it's projects they can do in the future. The whole idea of the increase in the rates was to someday be able to replace the wastewater treatment plant again, which was a $50 million project, without having to bond the entire thing like we did this last time. So they are saving for these types of future infrastructure endeavors. The water fund, they have a carryover projects of $7.4 million. The biggest one is the east-west transmission main, but you can see there's quite a few projects going on there. They have vehicle replacement that's rolling forward about $760,000, and then they have the emergency generators. That's a grant, so revenue and expense will be added of about $800,000 that they haven't spent yet. This one does not have as much undesignated. We did the same rate study here. However, the water fund is based on consumption, so it's a little more volatile. And then the last one I was going to talk about was the fleet fund. This was mainly $900,000 of it is that radio division for going to the state. And then we had a supplemental approved for a communication foreman of $124,000 in benefits and salaries. So up to you guys if you want me to talk about RDA now, or if you have any questions here, and then we'll do RDA during RDA. Okay.
We'll do RDA when we get to the RDA.
Okay. Okay. I've had it done both ways, so whatever your
Does
pleasure.
anyone have any, I don't see anyone with their hand up, but one last try. Further questions? Supervisor Giomi, did you want to make a motion? Somebody's got their hand raised.
Sure. I move to adopt resolution number 2021-R-1.
Ms. Schutte, are you the second? I know. I saw you, but I'm like these,
then I
when they're tapping on the microphone, yeah.
I second it.
Okay. I have a motion by Supervisor Giomi and a second by Supervisor Schutte to approve the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion has carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Russell. And
I really want to thank the board and the new members for their interest in asking questions, and please don't ever feel bad asking questions. That's what we're here for.
Well, You are wonderful, and
thank you.
your patience, and yeah, I would call. It's like, okay, here we go again, and I just really appreciate it because once it starts to make sense, and it makes sense. So thank
Good,
you.
I'm glad.
Thank you again. Thank you, Sherry. Okay, we're going to recess as the Board of Supervisors, and we're going to, well, let's see if I can do this twice. Call the Redevelopment Authority to order. Ms. Rollet, may I have a roll call, please? It's like if she can get her, I see everybody pushing on the microphones.
I got it. Member Jones? Member Shooty?
Present.
Member White? Here. Vice Chair Giomi?
Here.
And Chairwoman Bagwell.
Here, thank you. Clear that. We're going to move, public comment for the Redevelopment Authority. Desi, do we have anyone on the line?
I see no public comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Do I have anyone here with a public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 22A, which is discussion and possible action regarding a resolution to augment and amend the Redevelopment Authority budget for 2020-21. Ms. Russell?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So the redevelopment fund is the redevelopment division is 3 different funds. And when we roll forward the 2020 numbers from the budget unspent into 21, we typically add those dollars to the redevelopment revolving fund because that is where all the activity happens. That's where all the programs happen. So we take like extra interest that we earned in the tax increment fund or any savings we had in the admin fund, and we transfer those into the redevelopment revolving fund. So that's really the admin and the redevelopment fund. They're very easy. The revolving fund, we've rolled forward $729,000 of carryover projects. Again, these were approved in the prior year, not spent, so they're moving into the current year. The little bit of the Fuji Park Master Plan and the South Carson Street Traffic Circulation Study, $40,000. Again, these might be done. However, because our year end is 6/30, we need to bring these dollars into the fiscal 21 year. The downtown entry sign of $25,000 we have set aside, and that's for the roundabout that eventually will have some artwork or something there. The park signs, $47,200 was remaining there, so we're rolling that forward. And then the undesignated savings, which again is from the extra interest earnings and savings in the admin, is $746,000.
Does anybody have any questions? I don't see any questions of that. Do I have someone that would like to make the motion? Okay, Supervisor Giomi, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to have this mic down by the end of this meeting. I move to adopt resolution number 2021-RA-R1.
I have a motion by Supervisor Giomi and a second by Supervisor White. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Desi, is there any final public comment?
There is no final public comment, Madam Chair.
Any final public comment here? Okay, then we will adjourn as the Redevelopment Authority, and I'll reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. We are on item 26A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of Bill number 101 on second reading, an ordinance changing the zoning from general commercial to limited industrial on property located at 900 Mallory Way. Ms. Ferris, you want to take us through any comments or changes from the prior?
Sure. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. As Mayor indicated, this is a zoning map amendment for a 3-acre parcel on Mallory Way, changing the zoning from general commercial to limited industrial. On January 7th, 2021, the board introduced the ordinance. This is the second reading, and there have been no changes.
No further changes. Is there any questions from the members of the board? Seeing no questions, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Shooty.
Oh, I don't have the ordinance number, though. Oops, let me grab it.
2021-2.
Thank you. I move to adopt Bill number 101 on second reading, ordinance number 2021-2.
Do I have a second? I have a motion by Supervisor Shooty and a second by Supervisor Jones. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Ferris. We'll move on to agenda item number 26B. This is for discussion and possible action regarding the master plan annual report from the Planning Commission. Mr. Plemmel,
Good morning, everybody. Lee Plummel,
let's
Community.
go to the afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. I went to lunch, I did. Lee Plummel, Community Development Director. You have this report in front of you, and I'm just going to give kind of a little bit of a brief presentation and overview. This item is for you to accept and consider this report and recommendations from the Planning Commission. And this is brought to you annually in January, typically, sometimes in December, but we waited till all the new board members were seated this time, so that you can consider these recommendations for your work programs and direction to staff in the next year. As it's, just a little bit of background, as it says, we do this because NRS requires it. It does say that the Planning Commission shall provide recommendations to the board annually to promote the master plan. And I just want to note that, this isn't just something we do annually. You're doing master planning throughout the year. We have the, transportation plans, parks and recreation plans, water, sewer master plans that are regularly updated, and you have information to that throughout the year. But so kind of the focus of this is really more of the planning actions with the Planning Commission, but you have in your packet kind of a very high-level overview of some of the activities that other departments have been doing to address the master plan. And kind of the term master plan generally is that this document that from which kind of these bullets point come from and the policies come from is the big overarching broad master plan. There's lots of little master plans, as I mentioned, like the Parks and Rec master plan underneath it that are more specific, more detailed, action-oriented. So just a little bit of an overview about this master plan. I'll spend a little bit more time here than usual. You'll get used to this, doing this every year. But this is an advisory document that outlines the vision and goals. So it's not code. It's not a requirement to follow. We have to adopt code to implement it. It provides guidance and it's guidance for decisions that you make throughout. You use it as part of the findings of projects. It does say in the master plan that it's to be reviewed annually, which we're doing now, and revised as needed. And we do, even as recommended in this, there have been little amendments to it. It's not untouched. It's about 15 years old now, the master plan document that we have, but it's not completely untouched. We update things as noted in this report. There's some other recommendations to evaluate and look at some areas. So we are continually doing that. And then again, the last point here is that master plans are typically a guideline for the next 20 years of how you want to develop. And, as I noted, this master plan is about 20 years old. And we are getting to that point where it's come up over the last few years that it's time to relook at the master plan. I skipped a slide and we're going to come back to it because just regarding the time period of the master plan, this is one of the graphics in your report regarding the residential permits that we've had in the last 15 years and prior to that. And I note on the slide the point at which we adopted the master plan, which was in 2006. It was at the end of a period of really high growth, relatively high growth rate, at least for Carson City. A lot of those are residential permits only, but just generally there's a lot of growth going on. And we got to 2006, and master plan was adopted, and all of a sudden, for 9 years, things really just stopped. So kind of if you look at really, and the master plan is kind of implemented through development, implementing the master plan as much as anything else. So you kind of look at, it's really been the last 5 years when we've got back to a point where we're kind of getting near pre-recession growth rates. Looking at the last 5 years there, well, we have that one big year because the Carson Hills apartments up above the theater were 375 units at one shot. So that's why there's that big spike there in permits, although they're still under construction. But you kind of average the last 5 years is about 270 units per year, which gets us kind of back into that, close to that range of pre-recession levels of development. So on the one hand, it's about time to start looking at the master plan, but we got other priorities for this year. And on the other hand, they're really it's kind of like the policies and the build out was delayed by about 9 or 10 years because of the recession. So backing up a slide here, this is the graph showing the population, again, pointing out where we were in 2020, according to the demographer, and showing our potential growth rates. And we use these projections and update them annually based on the demographer and kind of looking out and evaluating things. And recently gave this to transportation for plans they're working on. We look at a high growth rate, low growth rate, kind of that the dark line that doesn't go as far out as the latest demographer's estimated growth projections. But we get out to and kind of looking at our land use capacity analysis, which is not just a population-based thing, and housing units are only a part of growth, but as it relates to our master plan land use map that has areas designated for future residential development, it would allow for this type of population to get to a build out of about 80,000 people. And that, looking at those projected growth rates, we wouldn't get to that point till about 30 years from now, not till after 2050. So we have time to get to a little bit. It comes up quick though, right? So just a couple now, just to get into the recommendations, just a couple graphics here is just a couple things. So with the master plan update, there's some zoning corrections, or at least some areas that the Planning Commission has recommended to explore the master plan and zoning designations for, with the first being the Lapeer Drive area. It's designated mixed-use commercial in that area. There's housing in that area and other uses. They've been getting applications for more residential uses, and so it's an area that we would go out and notify them and go through the process to evaluate the land use in that area and see if there should be change to residential where there's actually residential, and look at other master plan and zoning issues there. Any questions on this one that particular property while I'm there? I only have 2 more of these.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. The next one is actually a single property that currently has 3 master plan designations and 3 zoning districts on it, and it was the subject of a special use permit, and the Planning Commission noted that and thought that should be cleaned up. So that's another one we'll go back and look at and find the appropriate designation for that one property. And then the last one is actually not something that the Planning Commission considered 2 months ago in November when they met, but something that's come up since then, and the subject of the zoning that you just passed, and I think it was brought up, where the part of this, if you look at the zoning map on the right there, we have this commercial area that was zoned for the school. The school's no longer there. You had a request from one property owner to go back to the limited industrial for the industrial use. And so on the remaining 2 parcels, we would go back and notify them and see if it's appropriate to change that zoning back consistent with the surrounding. So just to conclude my presentation before I take questions, there aren't a large number of recommendations for master plan changes in this, because the big one is to complete the Title 18 and Development Standard Review and Amendments. And so in addition to regular planning activities, that's going to be a big task for our staff as well as the district attorney's staff. So that's the big project. And once we get past that, we have Title 17, and I think into future years, we'll then consider looking at an update of the master plan once we get past those priority things. And then number 2 there is those master plan and zoning consistency items that I just reviewed in the prior 3 slides. That's what I had to go over this. Be happy to answer any questions.
So, Mr. Plemmel, for clarification, because I do get a lot of questions, and as you indicated, when is the right time to pull the trigger on a revision or a full look at the master plan? So did I hear you correctly that you think that will be of value when we complete our Title 18 and Title 17 updates? Because then all of it will fit together. I mean, the objective is you want your zoning, and you just want it all to work in concert with one another. So are you saying 2 to 3 years you see a master plan?
That would be our recommendation. I think that's consistent with the discussions we've had with the board previously.
Okay. That's great, because we definitely want to plan, because there's two methodologies, right, to do a master plan. We can do it ourselves and take longer, or we can hire a consultant and try and, I just want the general public to understand. So if we're looking in a couple of years to do the master plan review, we then have methodologies that we as a board can discuss on how we want to approach the master plan amendments. So,
Well, and I would say the master plan is, I don't want to say more deserving of significant public input process even than the zoning code. I think there's some things we can identify that need to be fixed based on practice in the zoning code, but the master plan is a policy document where you really want the public input and to reach out to those areas where there might be some changes and get a lot of input. So it's meaning, for one, that now's the really tough time to do that, and it's a labor-intensive or cost-intensive process to do that.
okay, thank you. Supervisor Giomi, you have a question?
Yeah, to tag on to that, I mean, I think Lee's right. I think we should start, setting aside, we just heard the budget augmentations, and I think we need to start planning for that, because we know we're talking about several $100,000s to do a facilitated master plan. And I think either we're going to have to hire staff for you to do that, or we're going to have to hire a consultant. I mean, because existing staff cannot manage projects that we have on a daily basis and do a master plan update. So I just would, like us to start thinking about that at that 2 or 3 year mark as we start looking at our long-term capital projects. And I think two things. I mean, we're seeing, and the master plan contemplated this, but now we're seeing this sort of struggle between the higher density, more compact building, which is what the master plan called for almost 15 years ago. But now, as we're seeing it materialize, we're seeing, a significant amount of friction in the community between, people who don't want that and people who do. And so, I think a master plan update with the charrettes and gaining the input from people is the way to fix that. And this isn't a master plan thing, but I don't want to lose sight of this, because I brought it up last year, and I don't know that we've done anything in a year on it, and maybe it's an item for our future planning. But we really need to start looking, in my opinion, before it's too late, because we do have a little bit of growth left, finding ways to either reward or encourage or entice developers to intermix affordable housing with development. We have not done any of that, and we have a lot of developments that are on the books right now that have entitlements that don't have any of that affordable housing component to it. And I'm afraid we're going to miss an opportunity if we don't codify that somehow, whether that gets And I don't think it's a master plan issue, but I definitely feel like it's maybe a Title 18 issue or maybe a whole nother section. But I don't want to lose sight of that. I know I'm just one person, but I think it's important for us to do that, whether that is through, you know, a tax benefit to the developer or whatever it may be. But intermixing affordable housing is, in my opinion, the best way to go, because it doesn't isolate a group of people, or workforce housing. It doesn't isolate that group of people to a certain part of town. So I'd really like to find a way to make sure that that's on somebody's radar and somebody's working on that.
We'll include that with the Title 18 discussion this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mr. Plemmel? No. Supervisor Schutte?
Thank you. I agree with what Supervisor Giomi is saying, and you know, something about updating the master plan, which I think is really important, and we do need to be mindful, and it does in fact need to be somewhat in concert with zoning issues because of this back and forth and the friction. You know, sometimes friction is considered a negative, but really it isn't. It's this great opportunity to have a discussion about what people really care about, what's important to the neighborhood, to the community, but then have a discussion also about the whys behind why a development is being considered and the process and how the process was met. So I love this conversation. Regarding the affordable housing, absolutely, again, how the mixture, but that again goes into the why. Why is this a great idea or a helpful idea, and what are the concerns within the communities? Because it wouldn't just be the developers facing perhaps some pushback. Perhaps neighbors and neighborhoods might struggle with because of ideas they haven't heard about, or they don't feel like they've been heard. So it's super exciting, and I think it's going to bring some robust dialogue and a lot of learning, which is great.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. I don't really have a question on the agenda item. I just wanted to publicly thank Lee and his staff for getting my questions answered. I know those were not simple questions. So I just wanted to say that straight up to you. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else with their hand up for any questions. So would someone like to make a motion? Then it's Supervisor Giomi. And just for the record, why I'm calling on him so the rest of the board knows, if no one puts their hand up to make the motion, he is the mayor pro tem, and so I'll automatically ask him to make a motion, just so you. Of course, I do want him to practice with the
microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I need a lot of that.
Okay.
I move to accept the master plan report as presented and incorporating the comments on the record.
I have a motion by Supervisor Giomi and a second by Supervisor White. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes or aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you all again, and thank you, Mr. Plemmel. I look forward to those opportunities for new master plan updates. We're going to move on to agenda item number 26C, which is discussion and possible action regarding a final subdivision map known as Little Lane Village Phase 1 for the creation of 44 residential lots. Ms. Sullivan, will you take us through this item, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. On September 19, 2019, the Board of Supervisors approved the tentative map for Little Lane Village by a vote of 3-0 with 2 absent. The tentative map was for 149 single-family lots and 21.32 acres located on the north side of Little Lane. Since that time, the applicant has obtained a site improvement permit and begun installation of infrastructure necessary to serve the proposed lots. To the extent the improvements have not been made, the applicant has provided a performance bond. The applicant is now seeking approval of a final map to create 44 lots with 2.51 acres of common area and roadways. Per Municipal Code 17.06.005, the Board of Supervisors has the authority to approve a final map. The board may only approve the final, or will only approve the final map upon finding that each of the conditions of approval of the tentative map have been met. Staff, as well as the applicant, have provided memos articulating how each condition of approval has been met. I want to focus on condition of approval 25 for a minute. That condition of approval stated that an existing fence around well number 4 needed to be within the proposed parcel. So essentially, the city had improvements associated with the well off of city property. To accomplish this, the applicant has submitted a merger and re-subdivision of land that will result in the well site going from 6,098 square feet to 22,695 square feet. And can we go to the next slide? I have a diagram up on the screen. The blue is the existing lot. The yellow is it's an exhibit, but it's the resulting lot. So you can see how this all works. To cause this to happen, the city would transfer its land to the parent parcel, and then the new lot would be created, and the city would accept that new lot that got created. So documents are included, and there's a resolution in your packet to allow the mayor to sign the necessary documents to transfer the property to result in this larger piece of land around well number 4, so that all of the improvements associated with the well are on the city's land. The land transfer documents have been reviewed by the city's real property manager and found to be adequate. The city is in possession of all of the documents and would be the responsible party for recordation. With that, the staff is recommending approval of this final map. Spencer Fellows from Manhard Consulting, I believe, is on the line, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Giomi, you have a question?
Yes. On the, I just want to confirm, that the access to this is that 30-foot water sewer drainage and access easement, that the city's reviewed that and it's sufficient access for the parcel, because I don't see any other access off the main road.
Yes, the city did, particularly our development engineering folks, spent a lot of time making sure that access to that well site was adequate and that it was exclusive. So the improvements that you see identified would not conflict with the city's access to the well site, nor would they conflict with the water line itself, which is a critical water line.
Nor would they be part of the detention pond / open space, correct?
No, there is, I think, a slope that's part of the detention pond, and development engineering was okay with that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. I don't see any further questions. Would someone like to, oh, sorry, Mr. Jones?
Reading through this, it said parking will be allowed on the north side of Little Lane only. That's a pretty busy street, and I assume it's going to be widened to where it connects to the townhomes. I would prefer there'd be no parking on that street. Why are you allowing it only on one side?
At the time of tentative map, that was actually a pretty significant discussion among the Board of Supervisors at that time. And the Board of Supervisors was very specific that they wanted to permit the parking along that north side of Little Lane so that property owners whose front doors sort of face there would be able to park in front of their home or have guests park in front of their home. The street will be expanded so that what you see in front of Arbor Villas right now, that street section continues in front of Little Lane Village.
Well, I didn't understand that the homes were going to face that little. I misunderstood. Okay,
that was a very deliberate discussion that the board had.
Okay, all right.
Removed it? Okay. So seeing no further questions, would someone like to make a motion? Supervisor Giomi? See, that's how it works.
All I want
They're
for
catching on.
Christmas is a different microphone. I move to approve the final subdivision map known as Little Lane Village Phase 1 based on the findings that it fully complies with all the conditions of approval of tentative subdivision map TSM-19-103 and to adopt resolution number 2021-R2.
I have a motion by Supervisor Giomi and is that a second by Supervisor White? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion has carried unanimously. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Ms. Sullivan. We will now move on to agenda item 27A. This is for discussion and possible action regarding ratification of the submission of a grant application to the Nevada Housing Division for an emergency solutions grant. Do I have Nikki Akers or Mary Jane? Oh, that, then you couldn't have done that any more perfect, right? So Mary Jane, you want to take us through this item, please?
Yes, good afternoon. Mary Jane Ostrander with Carson City Human Services, the division manager. So the Emergency Solutions Grant is a housing grant that we have historically received each year. It helps with rapid rehousing of the homeless as well as homeless prevention. This is a emergency solutions grant related to COVID, some additional funding. So it was a quick turnaround for the application. So the application has already been submitted. What this will allow us to do is to pick up some of the expenses that we've been paying with the CARES grant. The CARES grant expired on December 31st, and so this will pick up from that for about 18 months. And what it's going to cover is I have some funding here for the street outreach. We have been paying for 3 portable restrooms in the community. Those were put into the community because lots of businesses and public places were closed. And so you have a homeless population that had no place to go. So, so that'll continue that funding or being able to fund that and provide that. The other thing that we've had is we've had an emergency plan for anybody that needs to quarantine that does not have a place to quarantine. We made an arrangement with Fish. They will shut down part of their shelter so that we can quarantine that person, and then whoever's in the shelter, we have to put in motels during that time. Back in March, we did contact all the motels. They did not want to work with anybody that had COVID. And we'd either have to rent the entire motel or not have anybody there. So, so this was kind of our emergency plan. We have sent, and it is in here because it kind of happened the same time I was writing the grant, so I squeezed it in there. But we do have one motel that has allowed us to rent 1 room on the very end for COVID positive that needs a quarantine. So that could save some of the expenses because as that agreement, we have also agreed to decontaminate the shelter or the motel room after the positive COVID leaves. So those expenses are also in here. And then the other expense that's in here is about $75,000 toward homeless prevention. Again, you know, people are off and on getting eviction notices depending on the moratorium. When they do, they usually have a substantial past due amount. And so that's going to help with some of that. And with the Emergency Solutions Grant, it does allow us to not only pay that past due, but help them for more than 1 month if needed. And again, a lot of the rental money that came into our community expired at the end of December, so this will pick it up from there. Human Services, this isn't related, but Human Services should be getting more rental money as well from our Community Services Block Grant. So, you know, and that's kind of been on hold. We've had some of that, but we've been waiting for the other monies to Ours can go another 2 years, so just kind of holding that back. And so the only other expenses in here are for some admin and data collection.
Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, I do want to comment or just in general ask a question. So you've indicated that you would potentially pay back assistance. So let's say they haven't paid for 9 months. Are you indicating that you'll pay like $5,000 in back rent? Or are you seeing that, does our policy, I think we brought the overall policy, I don't know, a few months ago. The time is going quickly in my mind, but how do you see that working versus, that would take it away really quickly.
The Emergency Solutions Grant actually allows us to pay up to 6 months of past due. However, $75,000 is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money.
Not when you're doing
And
back.
so, I mean, we really have to weigh that as far as what funding is available or left, what is that balance, and what have they done to try to pay, Even $25 a week to your landlord is an effort. And so a lot of that'll be in there, and it may be setting them up in a program. We're going to help you with half of your rent for 3 or 4 months, let's say, and that other half you need to pay toward that past due amount. So we may try to work with them on that. It really is a case by case, but we do have a lot of options in that area, and they need to show that they've been impacted by COVID.
So again, it's not someone just realizing there's a moratorium, so they just said, great, I don't have to pay because no one can kick me out. They
Right.
have to have an actual COVID event in their own life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have been keeping in touch with all the landlords all along, just kind of finding out, from them, do you have anybody in your complex you're worried about? Send them over. There is funding available. And so we've kind of had somewhat of a handle on how many past dues there have been. And I say somewhat because there's a couple that have popped in our office that kind of surprised us. But so we have been trying to work with the property managers all along. So
Thank you so much. Supervisor Giomi, you have a question?
Yeah, and or a comment. I mean, I know that there are landlords too who are working with their tenants. There are landlords who have lowered rents, with this in mind, knowing that their tenants have become unemployed. So, that helps the whole situation too.
absolutely. And a lot of times in the cases, especially if somebody comes in with a tremendous back due amount, we will call the landlord and kind of get their side of the story. And sometimes they're upset, they never talk to us, they never have come in. So then we kind of mediate that conversation. So we don't want to just bail them out either. They need to be held accountable because, like it or not, it's due every month.
Great. Thank you so much. I don't see any further questions. Supervisor Schutte, would you like to try a motion? Let's see how she can do on the microphone. I think she's got the touchdown, though. There's no number on this one. It's just approval of the grant. As soon as she's green, she got it.
Performance art. I move to ratify submission of the grant application.
I have a motion by Supervisor Schutte and a second by Supervisor White. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion has carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Jane, very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to agenda item number 28A. This is for discussion and possible action regarding directives and recommendations concerning the Carson City departmental and staff functions, dealing with our exercise of emergency powers pursuant to NRS Chapter 244 and 414 and Carson City Municipal Code Chapter 602. I see Ms. Freeman in the audience, come on up and tell us how we're doing this 2-week period. Thank you.
Jeannie Freeman for the record. It's hard to believe that it's already been 2 weeks since I saw you all last. It's amazing how fast time goes by. And as we typically do in our 2-week updates with the board, I'm going to go ahead and give you some information related to Carson City cases. We're looking now at the 2-week period of January 3rd through January 16 of 2021. There were 418 confirmed cases in Carson City. This represents 49% of all the Quad County cases during that 2-week period, and it is a 27% decrease from the previous 2-week period.
Just a moment. I've got a request from the recorder. That's not an accident, right? It is an accident? Well, I was so impressed with myself for seeing a request for recess. Let me clear that. Sorry, Jeannie. I thought the recording system had died on us, and so we had to stop. Go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. So I'm going to go back and highlight that that is, again, a 27% decrease from the previous 2-week period. The decrease indicates a trend of decreased transmission in Carson City, which is the direction we absolutely want to be headed. On average, there were 30 new cases each day throughout Carson City during that 2-week period, and the average age was 46 years old. There were 3 known hospitalizations among Carson City cases. There were 28 students who tested positive for COVID-19 during that 2-week period, and of these student cases, 39% attended while they were in their infectious period. There were 81 skilled nursing or long-term care facility-related cases during that period, which accounted for 19% of all of our Carson City cases, and community exposure accounted for 29% of those exposures. So that's what I have for you for the 2 weeks related to that. Are there questions about that data before I move on?
I do have just a question in general. Can you repeat the skilled nursing facilities was what percentage?
Was 19% of our Carson City cases.
Can you give me an update on the vaccination program for them? Because I thought that was you're already going to cover that in your next little part. We're on, go.
I'm starting to learn the questions that are going to come to me, so I anticipate them. And Supervisor Schutte did ask that question last time when I was with you as to what the status was. And after that Board of Supervisors meeting, we went back to the office and we called every single one of our long-term care and skilled nursing facilities in the region and asked them if they had been contacted by the pharmacy program, if they had already received their first doses, what their schedule was. We found out that they had all been scheduled. Then we found out that there was one that had been canceled on a couple of times, and we pushed really hard towards the state and said, if you won't take care of them, we will take care of them. I realize it is a federal program, but the federal program is underperforming at this point in time, and we're not going to continue moving forward with our community if we're leaving our most vulnerable without the vaccine. So we pushed on that. Amazingly, the federal program called that agency the same day that we pushed and got them scheduled for that Saturday.
Do you think that's where so I'm just going to disclose, my mother is in a facility. Sure. And she came down with COVID. So my question really was that particular facility did not get its vaccinations. So that was pretty actually sad to me seeing that. So thank you.
So we do know that we have a couple of facilities within the Quad County region. I do believe that one of them is in Carson that isn't scheduled for their first dose until the first week of February. We did speak with the director of those facilities, and they were comfortable with the appointments and the schedule that they had been set up with the federal program. And the reason part of that was because to go through the process with corporate, to go through and have it all changed again and to do it all again, it just felt like it was going to be more burdensome and would bring them right up to the point where their vaccination schedule was already in place. So that is their rationale behind that. But we pushed to the state and they pushed to the federal program. If they cancel again, they're done. 3 strikes, you're totally out. And actually it's 2 strikes and you're totally out, and we'll take care of it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our testing numbers continue to go down. Very few people are interested in being tested either at the health department or at our community testing events. We have seen that consistently. Testing is one of the metrics that Carson City is measured against when it comes to the governor's office assessments. And so if our testing numbers continue to go down, there won't be adequate testing, and that will be one of the metrics that Carson City fails upon when it comes to that. So just being conscientious of what that looks like and that interest, I think people are really wanting to put more energy into finding an appointment for a vaccine at this point than what it is related to the testing. Questions about testing before I get into presentation about vaccine?
Can I just ask on testing, do you see that as a long-term goal, really, or even that the playbook and even the federal government will recognize as you start getting to 20, 30, 50, 80% coverage with the vaccine, that the testing component will no longer be one of the elements that we're judged on?
Sure. So I can't assess where we are with that as a state. I do think that the governor's office is looking at a variety of different things and measuring a lot of different assessments. When it comes from a federal perspective, there's additional money that is being pushed down to local governments for 30 months, and it includes funding for testing.
30 months.
And 30 additional months to include testing. And so when you start looking at what the federal award announcements are and what the scope of work is related to that, I'm saying that at this point, the federal government has not stepped back from the testing recommendation. I do think that there's going to be some need for us to continue with that for quite a while, because we won't hit that what they call herd immunity or community immunity level for a while. It takes time, and not everybody's going to be interested in getting the vaccination. And so I'm not sure that testing at the same way that we're doing it now is going to be what is going to be on the docket for us, but I do think that testing will be an element that is part of that. But yeah, it was a little, you take what you get when it comes to you, and you go, oh, 30 more months. Okay, here we go. So that's part of what comes with the scope of work.
Supervisor Giomi?
Yeah, I think that from the information we're getting in our world is that I think you're going to see that testing move from community-based testing or physician office testing to home testing. So I think you're going to see an investment in improving the technology that allows you to do testing either at home or mail order or send away or just some sort of rapid test,
testing.
which is really what we should have been working on all along. Well, this is because of the delay in getting the test results back. And that interim, we know people are not quarantining when they feel sick. And so, if you can get that test in the hands of someone who, the minute they feel sick, can be tested and get an answer, the hope is that they don't then begin to go out and spread to the community or go to school or go to work or.
That makes sense. We've continually heard your report indicating the percentage that knowingly go out in the community with symptoms.
I think one of the other
Wow.
I think one of the other sides associated with the testing has to do with what other states and other countries around the world are going to allow when it comes to a test, right? So we do see that there is that development of those at-home rapid tests and so forth for people to use, but those are not considered valid for people to travel to certain states, and they're not being accepted by other countries. So we're going to continue to see that whole testing process evolve and what's acceptable around the world, and that will probably drive some of what it is that we're to do.
And then do you have another section there that now is going to target a discussion on the vaccine process?
Yes.
Take it away. Thank you.
I have lots of things to share about the vaccine because this is where we live now, right? It's important, and I want to make sure that it's put out here in a public meeting. State allocation, the state of Nevada right now is only being allocated 36,000 doses of vaccine each week. That's 1% of our population each week. And then they get reallocated to the jurisdictions based on population. And the Quad County population is 5% of the state population. So when you start looking at what those numbers look like, that's not a lot of vaccine coming into the region on a weekly basis. Unfortunately, the state's vaccine allocation was reduced significantly for this next week. And so what I want you to know is that the state immunization program, the State Division of Public and Behavioral Health, Division of Emergency Management and the governor's office, they are on calls every day, multiple calls every day, 7 days a week, doing whatever they can to advocate for Nevada to get a greater allocation of vaccine, because that's just not acceptable for what it is that we need to accomplish. Every week, we place our order on Tuesday. It's due by Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And then we get our allocation numbers usually by Thursday. Last week was great. We got them Wednesday night. I didn't get my allocation numbers today until noon. So when I don't get an allocation number until noon, and I let my partners know what that's going to look like, I cannot open up in good conscience any vaccine appointments until after I actually know what's going to come in. I don't want to turn people away and tell them and call them and cancel an appointment on them. To have them have that hope that there's going to be a vaccine and then it not be here is crushing. What we see in the public, it is absolutely crushing. And we do know that other jurisdictions have made promises and they are calling and telling people no. I know the public is frustrated. I know they're frustrated with us. I know they're frustrated with the process. I know it. We feel it. We're doing everything we can to make sure that every dose that comes in is being put into an arm. So I ask the public, continue to be patient. That patience is very difficult, but we are advocating, and so many people are advocating for all of you. So please make sure that you understand that.
Jeannie, may I ask a specific question? Because I
Sure.
had a public question earlier today. Well, I was on lunch, let's put it that way. They indicated that they thought that Carson City had destroyed 140 units that somehow we had damaged or something and had to throw away. And I assured them that I call the health department or have a daily discussion, and that Carson City has put every vaccine we have in someone's arm. We're not wasting. And I think the confusion was that Washoe County had an event in which a lot of people did not come and they had a vaccine issue. Can you please assure the public that we're using every vaccine we have?
Sure. So I can't speak to Washoe County's situation. I would ask Washoe County to speak to that. But when it comes to Carson City Health and Human Services, we have wasted absolutely 0 doses. Not a single ounce of vaccine have we wasted. We have had 0 excursions. So there has been nothing that has caused us to date to call the manufacturer to see if anything is there. We are adamant. We spend time at the end of events making sure that we are calling, we are in communities, because we cannot transport a vial once it's been punctured, and we will not leave an event even with 1 dose. We will call anybody that we know in that community, and that's part of what we know as Quad Counties is we know the people in these different communities, but we make sure that those people who are getting those doses that might be at the end of the day fit within the categories that are currently eligible for receiving vaccine. We're not doing anything that is deviating from that, because then we would have no credibility to stand on, and then we would be misrepresenting all of you, and that's not an appropriate place for us to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so appointments. Appointments are challenging. I get that. There are too few appointments for the number of people who want to receive the vaccine right now. The online appointment system, I understand, it is cumbersome, it is challenging, it is difficult. Our older adults are not as comfortable with the internet. It's not an environment. They're used to calling and making appointments for themselves and having that available. The system says, too, when appointments are full, it'll say that there are no more appointments until the end of May. That's a fault of the program, and that's not the case because we open up appointments every week. So we ask people to continue checking back. But we are working on solutions, and that's what I want to assure all of you, and I want to assure the public that we're continuing to work on those solutions. We are readying so that we are set when the federal allocations increase. We are identifying permanent locations and other locations that we can do. Our public and private partners have really come to the forefront and are helping us so that we will be able to exceed what the state's expectation is of us, which will have us vaccinating on average more than 1,000 a day when those allocations reach the level that we can do. That is a lot of vaccine to be going out every day. We are collaborating with our senior centers, our counties, and our community coalitions to create a single helpline, a COVID vaccine helpline. And what our IT department here in Carson has been incredible with helping us get that established. It should be able to go live next week. I won't publish a number right now because I want to wait till it goes live, but we are going to test it. We're going to do everything we can to break it before we actually publish it. And one of the things is we have folks in Lyon County, Story County, Douglas, and Carson that will be able to use the soft phone system, and they'll be able to answer the lines wherever they are, and so we don't have to have them coming into Carson. And IT here has been just absolutely incredible. I'm so pleased and honored to be able to work with them on that. We're moving steadily towards identifying another appointment type system that we can use that will allow people to see all the events and will allow them to see what availability there is at that event before they click on it. And it will still be online because we have so many vaccines, but we're also pushing out messaging for people to make sure that they're helping their neighbors and their friends and their family members get registered for an appointment. That new system, we're testing out a variety of options right now, will allow us to attach the documents for registration to that so that they will be able to receive it. And that also people will be able to receive text message reminders of their appointments, because while our seniors may not be, and other people don't have access to computers and are not as comfortable, a lot of people have cell phones and will be able to receive text messages. So we're trying to find that opportunity for us to use that as well. Our pandemic vaccination providers, they continue to help us expand options and opportunities for our community to be vaccinated. We worked closely with the Nevada Pharmacy Board to be able to open up vaccination opportunities at a couple pharmacies here in Carson City. That's actually called the Pharmacy Bridge Program. Eventually, the federal government will provide allocation to nationwide pharmacies that they will be able to offer the vaccination. But in the interim, Nevada and the locals worked closely together to identify different pharmacies for people to be able to get that vaccination. Everything, regardless of where you're at, is an appointment-based system. It doesn't matter whether it's a pharmacy, it's a local provider, or it's the health department. Everything is an appointment-based system. So our Carson City Senior Center has been fantastic in helping with getting people connected and helping them get set up for appointments when those appointments are available. To give you a little bit of an idea, I know you like the numbers. I know Mayor Bagwell likes the data. So let me give you the data of where we're at. As of January 12th, 2021, Carson City Health and Human Services has received 4,775 first dose vaccines. That date of January 12th is there because that was the date we received our vaccine allocation that would get us through the 18th of January. So as of January 18, 2021, Carson City Health and Human Services has administered 4,510 vaccines. That other 265 doses was because we ordered enough to get us through the Tuesday in case we did not receive our vaccine on the 19th in time. Because we know we get our vaccine shipments either Monday or Tuesday. We hope by noon, but usually we have events that are scheduled before then. So we have that little bit to make sure that we get through that next day and we are not calling to cancel on folks. So when you look at what's there, we are doing our best to be as efficient as possible. Have we had some missteps along the way? Yes. Are we working to make those improvements? Absolutely. And the partners within this city and the partners from the region are really coming together to make that happen. And I know the public is frustrated, and I apologize for that. I know it every day, but we're here to serve you, and we're proud to serve you. And so thank you for your opportunity to let us do that.
Great. Do I have any questions of Jeannie? I have just a general note on this agenda item that I received from Mr. Fisher. Mostly, he would appreciate knowing if we have any other thinking or thoughts on how to combat the spread of the virus. I'm so happy to hear that reduction that you're talking about. So let me ask, do you see anything that we as a board or the community, is there any mark we're missing to help, decrease the spread? I know that I heard from Mr. Riccolo yesterday, I think, or the day before. He was quite impressed that the businesses have just really gotten better and how many he has visited and taken supplies, and that an 18% increase in the businesses asking for mask restocking and things like that. Is there anything that anyone has an idea of or something that we need to do that we're not doing?
No, we're doing it, and the community's doing it. I think it's important for us to not fall back on our laurels and take the reduction as something that we can then waver from the determination that we've had during this last 6 to 8 weeks with really trying to bring our numbers down in the city. The other piece is that even though the vaccine is available and people are starting to receive it, we still have to social distance, wash our hands, and wear our face coverings, because until we get to a level where there is significant amounts of the population that are vaccinated, those recommendations are not going to change. And we will continue to follow the recommendations from the CDC, and the CDC is saying you got to keep them in. And technically, until we get to a high percentage, what they look at, usually 80% or greater of the community being vaccinated, then it's not going to necessarily change our behaviors of what we're doing right now.
I don't see any other hands raised. I just want to make another, just a very positive comment about the community of Carson City. Several of us are, I guess we're going to be the testing group on the 30th of January to help in the data input methodology, because again, I don't think the general public understands that it's not just put a vaccine in someone's arm. We have to account for every single vaccine and where did it go and who got it. Because if you go on the national website, you can look at every single state and it'll say how many vaccines have been distributed. And then it says how many have actually been given, and it's a huge gap. And I think most of it's a data input problem, not that people aren't getting vaccinated. So I want to, in advance, already thank the initial team of Carson City residents that are volunteering, and we'll be testing our skills at some data input and then rolling that out further if we do well on the task. So just in advance, thank you everyone that emailed me indicating that you would volunteer at least 4 hours a week of your time. I just, again, I so proud of the people in Carson City, and that they're even willing to recognize that we're part of a quad and they don't care which entity they're doing the data entry for, that it's just, let's get more for the quad, because they realize the only way we're going to get more vaccine is if we can prove to everyone we can do 1,000 a day. And we can. I know we can. So.
Oh, yeah, we absolutely can. The other thing on that data entry piece that I'm really pleased is that the State Division of Public and Behavioral Health, they reached out and said, you guys are doing such an incredible job. We appreciate everything that you're doing. And we're offering this to jurisdictions. We have staff that are not fully being utilized right now. Would you be able to utilize a couple of staff a couple of days a week to come and help with data entry? And we said, absolutely, please. And so they're reaching out. Again, it's really a statewide effort in what that is. And then I'm just really proud of the team at Carson City Health and Human Services, because we were able to find ways to increase our efficiency with data entry, where we were able to drop it from 5 minutes a person for every vaccination down to 2. So we cut our data entry time in half.
It might go up to 2.5, because some of us might be a little rusty.
Okay.
But we will challenge our data entry skills. Give us, I don't know, 1 or 2 tries, and then we'll get back there to that 2 minutes. So don't hold us to 2 minutes on the first round. But
No
again,
problem.
does anyone have any further questions, thoughts? Anything you think we need to implement that we're not? Mr. Jones, you have a question or a comment? He hasn't practiced enough today, so.
Is there any indication if we're going to, how much serum we could look for down the future? Do you have any idea? Is it going to increase? Is it going to stay the same?
No, I have no insight on that. It's really one of those things where it's a battleground, and we'll wait and see if they're able to do anything different with a new administration at the federal level. Unsure what that's going to look like, but ultimately, they can't distribute what hasn't been manufactured. And so if there's a manufacturer slowdown or anything of that sort, I'm unsure what the holdup is. But it is important that there is not a stockpile of vaccine that's being held on a federal level either that is not being distributed. That's not accurate from everything that we're given from multiple directions. So we have to just kind of be patient with it and work through it. But whatever comes, we will find a way to make it happen and make it work. So we'll be ready.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Freeman, as always, for your great work. Please pass that on to the rest of the staff. They're not here for us to personally thank, but please let them know how much they're appreciated. We're out? Don't just pour it. Don't wreck the microphone. We just finally got it working. Thank you again so very much. So we're on to agenda item number 29, which is a plethora of items. Future agenda, status review, internal communications, correspondence, and status reports. I first want to do something under future agenda items. I know this morning that we had quite a bit of discussions and thought processes, and being that this is mostly a new board, I think I'm the only one actually that even ever voted on the BCC policies. I would like to have staff and the DA's office look at the policy, the BCC policy, and the application processes, and bring that back to this board for comment, thoughts, and potential changes. So I'd like that as a future agenda item. Does anybody see any raised hands? So, okay. Would anyone like to share anything from a committee that you've done or something that you want to share with the rest of the board? Supervisor Giomi.
Yeah, I'll talk about Water Subconservancy just briefly. Carson City resident Phyllis Atkinson won the Andy Aldex Award, which is the award recognized for major contributions in the Carson River watershed for conservation and resource and just basically improving the watershed. She was retired a year ago as a teacher from Pioneer High School. Used to work with Supervisor Schutte at Carson Middle School, an educator for 25 years, and as a Carson resident, the latest recipient of that award. And we gave that to her last night. And also, this is not a news flash, but we're at about 50% or less of precipitation in the water year, which starts October 1. So, it's, we still have some months to go, but it's not starting off well.
Not looking good. Okay. Does any other member of the board have a status update? Okay. Any internal communications or administrative matters? Anyone? Hey, we're cooking now. Do we have any outstanding correspondence to the board that we have not already discussed today? I think I got all mine out on the record. Okay. General comments that the board would like to do. Any announcements? Anyone have any announcements for the public? Okay. City Manager, Ms. Paulson.
Thank you.
She got it on, though.
I got it on. I just wanted to let you know I received an email from Congressman Porter, who is also with the Porter Group, who talked to us this morning. And he was talking about a couple of executive orders that should be signed today. And it did mention invoking the Defense Production Act to increase the supply of materials needed to get the vaccine into arms. I'm not sure if that includes the vaccine itself. Another thing that will benefit us is to restore full funding of the National Guard's pandemic work. And as you know, we've been using the National Guard for months and months in doing our testing and our vaccines, so that's good news. And that's it.
Thank you so very much. Supervisor Schutte, do you have something to share?
I do, and first of all, it's just doesn't need to be board related per se, right? It can be community. Perfect.
Community.
Okay, Carson Animal Services Initiative, CASI, We are hosting an Understanding Your Pet's Behavior seminar series with animal behaviorist Kelly Bolin. She is amazing. She's worked throughout the United States and Canada. And this behavior series will be featured every second and fourth Wednesday, and starting on January 27th. It is $10 a class, or all 7 for $50. And if you're interested, if you know someone who's interested, you can check out Friends of Cassie, FriendsOfCasi.org, and sign up or find out more or give us a call.
Great, thank you so very much. Any other staff comments or status? Gone. Okay, what I'm actually going to do then is move on to final public comment, adjournment, and then we will do the closed meeting that is listed on the agenda. That way, recording staff and others may leave without having to have a recess and come back. So just for process. So we're going to go to final public comment. Desi, do we have any?
There is no final public comment, Madam Mayor.
And any public comment in the room? I don't see any. So there's no objection, we're going to adjourn the meeting. And we'll stay here, but give us about 5 minutes for the recorder and other staff to exit. Thank you all for